Here we go at part 9 of the cold process soap tutorial for beginners. It's time to get another beginner design in the books. In this episode of Thermal Mermaid, we're making a green and yellow peacock swirl. By now we've completed a lot of cold process recipes, and we're going to push on with a new combination of oils that'll give us a nice thin soap that should give us plenty of time to work a pretty design into it. Now we still have a few more tips and tricks for beginners to go over to go along with the recipe that I wish I knew up front when I was learning how to make cold process. So I'm going to include those in this tutorial, so stay tuned for that. But first, if you're jumping into this tutorial at part 9, you won't know where to get a copy of this recipe if you want to print it out with the instructions, and occasionally I update these recipes with additional notes at the bottom. The entire 10 parts of this tutorial collection are organized and posted as Lesson 2 in the Thermal Mermaid Soapmakers course and resources. As you can see, this is just one small section of many resources here that you're invited to explore if you make a membership. If you aren't a member over here and you would still like easier access to the free material, I've made a place for that to happen. You can join me over at Thermal Mermaid Soap and Bath Making Facebook group. In the group, there's a link on the left that says Files, where I've posted over a dozen free recipes for you to grab and use. And that's great if you're just starting out, and it'll give you plenty of material to work with before you move on to more advanced projects. And don't forget, if you'd like to support this channel, click that thumbs up like button. That lets me know that you're out there saying hi back at me. And of course, if you'd like to get all 10 of these video recipes, make sure you subscribe now so that you'll get more recipes. So let's get started. Before we start this recipe, I want to show you something that you probably already know, but it helps sometimes just to see what other people are doing. I've mentioned that I have a set of these cardboard boxes wrapped in crafter's duct tape that I use as molds. Well, I do use them in real life, but also I use them exclusively in the beginning portion of this tutorial, so you can see that they hold up time after time. This red checkered one is the one that I use most frequently. I've had it for years. It works just as well now as it did when I first poured the very first slab. Here I have another homemade tool that we're going to be using in this design. It's a 12-inch piece of corrugated cardboard with barbecue skewers pushed into the cardboard at every third hole to make a comb. I can pull these out and adjust them to whatever space I want, and I can throw this away when I'm done if I don't want it kicking around, or I can put it away and it will last pretty much forever. When you're first starting out, it's fun to run out and buy all the soap making tools so that you have the bells and whistles for your projects. And if that's what you want to do, that's great. All those tools do work. However, if we were to make a list of every soap maker knick-knack from part 1 to part 10 in this tutorial, you might be up past $500 before you even start buying ingredients. Now, if that's not what you had in mind when you thought about picking up a hobby or even penny pinching for a business startup, these tools are nearly free to make, and they aren't just disposable pretend tools. They do exactly what you need them to do. Moving right along, our lye water solution for this recipe is 18.24 ounces of water and 6.59 ounces of lye crystals. We'll carefully make the lye water solution and set this aside to cool to room temperature before we mix it in with our oil combination. The oils for this recipe are 21.6 ounces of olive oil, 7.2 ounces of avocado oil, 14.4 ounces of lard, and 4.8 ounces of coconut oil. The fragrance we're using here is 1.5 ounces of crystal blue water. Now, we've been using a few of the same fragrances in this tutorial, so you can get the most out of 1 or 2 types in this 10-part series. The most important feature of this is that it's a light oil with no color, and it doesn't affect the recipe in any way. It's important not to choose a fragrance that will even slightly accelerate this recipe. Now, this is a very similar recipe to the recipe in part 8, but we've made some adjustments and we've removed the sweet almond oil for avocado oil, which is also an unsaturated fat, and it'll give us a nice thin slow trace soap batter. Now, I want to separate this project out into 4 parts. The main part is going to have 1.5 pounds of oils, while the other 3 will each have about 8 ounces. I'm going to color the main part a little lighter with a teaspoon of titanium dioxide dissolved in water, and then I'll go ahead and blend this right down. The surface colors on this design are going to be a very pretty yellow, green, and blue, so I'll go ahead and we'll get these colors blended in well as well. The three main colors in this project are fine powdered micas. These are not oxides or pigments. With these micas, I can put 1/2 teaspoon directly into the soap batter and it'll disperse almost immediately with little effort. If you choose greens or blues that say oxide or pigment on the package, make sure you smooth out those little grains in a bit of oil before adding it into the soap so you don't get those little balls of paint in your cured bars. The lightest batter is the base of the slab mold, and I'm going to pour this first and then leave it alone while I prepare the other colors to be applied. Once these colors have been mixed, I want to apply them to the surface in thin lines. So I'm going to carefully transfer them into ketchup dispenser bottles so I can use the applicator to squeeze the soap onto the surface. This is the second time we've transferred the soap into another container, and with all this movement, it's sure to start thickening. So not only do I want to get these filled and used, I'm going to have to refill the colors with what's left over. So it's important that we just keep the flow moving and we keep this project going along. Now once I'm ready, I'm going to immediately start to draw a serpentine pattern over the surface of the slab with each color. It's not important that this has to be a serpentine shape, it just really needs to be horizontal stripes, but this keeps the motion in flow. Now I'll be sure to alternate the colors and just keep piling them on top of one another until all the bottles are empty. Now after working on this for a few minutes, the soap has behaved just as it should. Unfortunately, I am taking too long. Now you can start to see here that the trace is becoming thick, and it's just going to happen if you have too many interruptions in your work. From the time I've mixed the batter to this point in real life, it's been about 15 minutes, although in the video here you've seen me cut it down into maybe 2 minutes. So in all this time I've been fiddling with the camera, I've had to sign for a package at the door, and what you're seeing here is just what it's going to look like if you start pushing the limits. Now right here I've thought about just clipping in the footage with a second batch so you can see exactly what it looks like when it's liquid thin. But actually it might be more helpful in this case to get an idea on what your time limits are with this recipe and what it looks like around the 15-minute mark. Typically what I'm doing here should take you about 5 minutes, but if you do leave it to sit, you can expect that it's going to start to set up, and like I said before, at 15 minutes is right where I'm starting to push it, and you can see that right here. Now from the very moment I finish applying the soap, I'm going to make one big gesture with the comb at the top of the mold and drag the teeth down to the bottom. Now before we finish this, I'm going to draw the peacock feathers in with a skewer. The pattern for this is specific but very simple. Start just a few inches from the left at the top of the mold. Draw a straight serpentine S down to the bottom, just a few inches wide. When you get to the bottom, lift the skewer and bring it back to the very first point that you started. Next, draw another serpentine S down to the bottom in the reverse image from the first one. When you get to the bottom, lift the skewer and bring it to the top of the mold. Move your hand several inches to the right to a fresh spot and repeat the first pattern. Continue to reverse and repeat until you get to the end of the mold. By the way, if you've seen my dragon glitter bars, this is how I make that design. I'll use purples and pinks and then draw the comb through just at that minute when the soap is starting to become thick enough to see a little bit of texture and still thin so that the soap moves with the skewer so you can get those bubble-shaped feathers in there. Now if you wait too long, you won't get those arches. Instead, you'll just get a line carved into the surface and the soap won't even budge. It'll look similar to that difference in that failed hanger swirl that you saw in the example in part 5. Now if you want to get a good glimpse of this with my hand out of the way, this is what the pattern should look like. Now we're ready to let this set up for 24 hours, and before we leave, spritz the top with rubbing alcohol, or you could put a cardboard cover over the top to prevent the unlikeliness of soda ash. And after 24 hours, we'll come back and cut these up into 12 bars, and as you can see, we have a brand new design to add to our beginner's collection. Now these will take 4 to 6 weeks to cure, and then they'll be ready for the market. Now if you enjoyed this video, stay tuned for the last part of this tutorial where I'll give you a few final tips on controlling your soap batter, and even one secret that I didn't know for several years, and it should be included in every beginner tutorial. Next up, part 10 will be our lava lamp bubbles.